Don't you cry. You know your daddy, he had to die. My trials, Lord. You know, those songs came from the Civil War, a period like this time this country could not bear again. And yet, recently people in high offices have placed us in this position with an issue called Watergate.
The first time after Watergate broke, the Texas Baptist Christian Life Commission, at our urging, they spoke out calling for a time of repentance and revival in our land.
They stink. They really stink. I mean, see, I'm not as educated as a lot of people, but the way I feel is like the people here, you know, the president is supposed to help the people in the United States, or try to, you know, and I haven't seen him do anything for nobody.
And that was the main impact that we felt from Watergate. It didn't have particularly partisan overtones. It didn't have, we weren't philosophically engaged in a heavy way. We just thought, oh my gosh, this is gonna make it harder than ever to convince people that politics isn't dirty. You've got a Polaroid snapshot of politics at its dirtiest.
I'm just, in a sense, disgruntled with politicians in general. I'm getting very bored and very disgusted with all
As the nation approached the 1976 election, there was great concern about voter apathy and cynicism towards government. Watergate's effects threatened to spread even beyond presidential politics.
We have corruption in government, we have corruption at the local level, and we have dishonesty between person to person, between neighbors. We need leadership. We need a family where the head of the family is something to follow, somebody to show us the way.
They ask why this phenomenon in America, some deeper national yearning in the country, are turning towards spirituality, are yearning for morality. There are many reasons for it. We've lost a great deal of confidence in some of our institutions, and there's a vacuum in the country. There's been a moral permissiveness that has frightened millions of people as to what the future is going to be. There's been a breakdown of the home in America. And now in the realm of politics, it has come into discussion. Americans want more than anything else this year in their president the spiritual quality.
The most important thing in my life is Jesus Christ.
It was a brand new phenomenon to have a man running for president who would so clearly state his faith, and who, as the campaign unfolded, clearly coming out of the religious community.
And I formed a very close, intimate, personal relationship with God through Christ that has given me a great deal of peace, equanimity, the ability to accept difficulties without unnecessarily being disturbed.
Most of the reporters who were with him at the time had no idea what he was talking about. It caught the mainstream press by total surprise.
That born-again business, what is it?
What was this kind of thing? It smacked of a kind of backwoodsy southern tradition. It was suspect.
So we wouldn't see a cabinet composed exclusively of Baptists?
No, as a matter of fact, I don't know how many Baptists we have on my immediate staff, but
the mainstream press in this country didn't really know what an evangelical was.
The Washington Post wrote that you have to understand that we don't know much about this sort of thing because we don't know any of these people. Well, what does she mean? Are they from another planet? Do they not have telephones? Are they unable to read?
I ended up spending a good portion of that campaign, certainly far more than I would have expected, attempting as a candidate's press secretary to provide some rudimentary understanding to journalists about Southern Baptist theology.
As a matter of fact, John Chancellor, who was anchoring the NBC Nightly News at the time, after Carter had acknowledged that he had been born again, got on national television and said, "We've looked up this born-again business, and it's nothing new."
We have checked on the religious meaning of Carter's profound experience. It is described by other Baptists as a common experience, not something out of the ordinary.
Well, millions of Americans just guffawed at this. It would be like saying we have considered the state of African Americans and we have determined that they are human beings, or that we have studied the history of women and we've decided that they're equal to men. It is amazing to hear something like this from an educated person.
And everybody is asking, what does it mean to be born again?
I was asked by the American Jewish Committee to come and speak to their regional meeting, their state meeting, and explain what being born again meant. I was interviewed by the press and local television all over the place about what's an evangelist, what's an evangelical, what's a Baptist, what does born again mean, where does this come from?
And Jesus answered and said unto him, Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God.
That phrase is as familiar and as, or was, and as uncontroversial to me as almost anything, as our Father who art in heaven.
How can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter the second time into his mother's womb and be born? Jesus answered, Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God. That which is born of flesh is flesh. That which is born of spirit is spirit. Marvel not that I say unto you, ye must be born again.
The interesting thing is that with respect to Jimmy Carter, none of this was contrived. This was, in fact, a very deeply felt part of his own background. He did teach Sunday school on Sundays. He did go to church. It was not somehow inventing him in an unreal situation. It was rather capturing the whole person that had to be portrayed. And so there was a desire to portray that, but at the same time, not to exaggerate it, because to exaggerate it would exaggerate the degree to which the religious side was critical to his role as a governor and future president, but also would risk a counter-reaction.
In the eyes of a lot of reporters, look, there's no way on this earth I would ever go to church every Sunday unless it furthered my career or my prospects or whatever. Jimmy Carter is going to church every Sunday. It must be some cynical manipulation or exploitation or hypocritical gesture.
We have room for about 20 or 30 more folks if y'all want to come on in and worship, brother.
Newsweek, June the 7th, said about that candidate, his allusions to his personal relationship with Jesus Christ are considered bad form. Brother, if there's anything we need, whether it's bad form or good politics, is a man who is more proud of his faith in Christ than any political aspirations he might have. And it would certainly be improper for me to call that man's name, but his initials are the same as our Lord's. Now,
interestingly, on the upside, there was no question but that this resonated amongst a whole group of people who I must say I was unaware of up to that point, who considered themselves, literally millions, as born again, the whole notion of having a sort of religious revival in their own life.
I loved Jimmy Carter. In the United States of America, who we say we allow people, you know, the privilege of their religion and things. And here was a man running for the president, and very few of us say anything about the Lord or Jesus. And he said, born again Christian. Jesus, my Lord. I can remember the night I heard it. And I was shocked, but I knew what I had to do. I had to work for him, and I did.
I was at the time with Campus Crusade for Christ, and can very well remember a number of the people in the movement of Campus Crusade, fellow staff members, who were very excited about Jimmy Carter. And it was all built around the concept or the reason that he had talked about being born again.
I supported him in Pennsylvania in the primary there with some friends that I had when he was running as a Democrat. We interviewed him maybe a year before that, so we're looking at, he was elected in 76 and 75, so somewhere in the 74 era. I think we were on a plane together to some stop in the Midwest in those days. So he was highly regarded by the evangelicals in those early days.
Only a short time remains until the upcoming national elections. We have asked 225,000 pastors to lead their congregations in special prayer for our nation during the 7 Sundays prior to the election. Would you join us in praying just 15 minutes a day during the next 40 days? Will you pray for your country, for your families, for your schools and churches, for your government? Will you pray that God's will be done in this upcoming election?
Amen. And I believe that I can be a better president if I am elected because of my faith.
He spoke the language. He was wearing the coloration that made these folks think, hey, he must be one of ours. Because he was a born-again Christian, he spoke about that, he was from the South, and he had the trappings. And people who were Christian but apolitical responded to him.
It was very important, if a Democrat was going to have any chance of winning, to become, in effect, a new Democrat, not part of that anti-establishment, anti-traditional value mode. They wanted a solidity, a certain return to religiosity, the notion of having someone who had very firm roots, very deeply felt family values, who would come to the White House and transfer those values on a nationwide basis. His emphasis on family values and traditional values was, in fact, absolutely critical. It was a metaphor for the broader need to heal the country as a whole.
We have lived through a time of torment, and now we are near a time of healing. Out of our national diversity can come national unity. I ask you to help us bind up our nation's wounds, to help us reach that point of healing. I have just taken the oath of office on the Bible my mother gave me just a few years ago, opened to a timeless admonition from the ancient prophet Micah. And what doth the Lord require of thee but to do justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with thy God?
By the mid-1970s, evangelicals were exalting their Christianity in every arena of modern American life, and the media, inspired by Carter's election, were eager to make sense of this seemingly new phenomenon.
Our segment 3 this evening, the second in our striking series on the born-again Christians, or evangelicals, who are, believe it or not, 1/3 of the adult Christians in America.
Christians have come a long way from the Roman Colosseum. What you're seeing is a movie produced by the evangelicals' leading intellectual, Dr. Francis Schaeffer, who in 1977 sees Christians not as victims in the world, but as leaders.
After we are Christians, then it is our responsibility to be an influence on our culture. We are to be the salt in that influence.
Francis Schaeffer, for me, as for thousands of young English and American students who were Christians, was a door opener. It was not only okay, it was right and proper and responsible as a Christian to understand the whole of life. All truth is God's truth, as the early Christians said.
He was pointing at art, he was pointing at music, he was pointing at film, he was pointing at theater, he was pointing at government, he was talking about polity. And all of these issues, evangelicals had kind of been on the off list. We didn't go to movies when I grew up, you know? And now he was talking about the great films, the way they've changed our lives. We didn't go to Florence to look at the statues with leaves. We stayed home and looked at Solomon's Head of Christ on a flannel graph. And suddenly, Francis was opening the whole world to us and saying, we're Christians. This all belongs to us.
Get excited, go tell everybody that Jesus Christ is King.
The supper clubs fulfill a community-wide need for a night spot, a family-style night spot, where they know they can go be entertained and have a deluxe environment.
Jesus Christ is still the King of Kings.
We're an amateur team, and we're all former college athletes that have graduated from across the country. And we're joined together now for a common cause besides basketball, and that is to share with others the person of Jesus Christ.
Religion is business, and in America, it is big business, very big business.
You are the self-proclaimed king of American pornographers, and now something has happened to you. Can you describe yourself as a born-again Christian, which is a phrase and an experience that a lot of people are now familiar with, or were you ever born the first time in terms of Christianity?
I don't think I was ever born the first time. I know that I am born again now.
Jesus Christ is King. Jesus Christ is still the King of Kings.
Do not think Christianity is a small thing. Do not sell it short. Christianity is intellectually viable. Christianity is intellectually sayable to our generation. Christianity covers the whole spectrum of life. You need never be ashamed of it. No matter how far you go, you'll never sail off the end of the world. The Bible is there and it covers the whole spectrum of life. I'd lay upon you. God has given us a beautiful thing. Please do not truncate it and do not sell it short.
This is the 700 Club. On this edition, we speculate on man's future in space. Now, here's your host, Pat Robertson.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. A little spacewalk. Hey, Mr. Spock, good morning.
Good morning, Captain.
We went on the air in 1973 with the station in Dallas, Texas, a UHF independent. Up to this time, I've laughingly said we were playing soccer and everybody else was playing football.
There was nothing. There were about 4 full-time employees. It was 17,000 watts of black and white television. You couldn't pick up the signal around the block. If you had to have a radio, some kind of antenna, you had to get a piece of wire or coat hanger to make a loop. Nobody knew what UHF was. Nobody got it. Nobody cared about it.
And I began to look at the rating books and begin to understand how audience flow worked, and I understood what the demographics in America were. And I therefore began to purchase some of the wholesome situation comedies, the Dick Van Dykes, Hogan's Heroes, Gomer Pyle, that stuff, Leave It to Beaver, etc., Lassie, some of those classics, and began to program our television stations with this type of fare, with the religious programs having a key slot in prime time.
I think the first program, the secular program we had, was Queen for a Day. And when that one aired, there were many that were just so upset because on that first program, they chose to have, that program happened to have a number of ladies in bathing suits, as I recall, for some reason. And so that got everybody, a lot of people upset within this debate. Okay, now we're beginning to compromise. See, our first program, we put it on the air, and we haven't even got a commercial, and we're already starting to compromise.
Well, our afternoon audience jumped 400% in 2 weeks in our station in Norfolk. And in Dallas, we had some extremely favorable ratings. As a matter of fact, we exceeded in the ratings the Doubleday station, which had been around for 10 years.
Calls are coming in right at this minute.
For Pat Robertson, it was important that CBN look like the best television could do, with as much sophistication so that they could feel proud of themselves as evangelicals, and that he could have let them feel that they were just as good as anyone else.
And driving my car that weekend, I looked at Dottie and I said, darling, there's no doubt in my mind that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. And Charlie Duke was born again that instant. Praise God. And compared to going with the moon, no comparison. Pat, for 6 years I said I could live for 1,000 years and never have an experience like walking on the moon. But that moon trip lasted for 3 days. Yeah. And my walk with Jesus is forever. And that walk with Jesus is so fantastic that I don't even compare walking on the moon. Praise God.
The world is lost. But the people who are make up that lost world are made in the image of God, so they have great value. But the world is not only lost, the 20th century is broken. It is full of tears. It has no answers. And it's up to us to stand upon the Word of God in order to reach out to these people who are not only lost for eternity if they do not turn to Christ, but are meaningless now.
Many evangelical and fundamentalists felt that the very nation their parents and grandparents had handed them was being squandered by the 60s generation. Now everything is about sex and sensuality. Everything is about feeling good. Everything is about your erogenous zones. Everything is about this world, this moment, this very nanosecond. These are not the cause of our decadence, but a reflection of it. You get these things when a nation turns its back on God, on moral principles, don't teach them at home, don't live them at home, don't teach them in school, and reinforce them in the culture.
To see groups that were actually parading down the street with big placards that were the Socialist Party and lesbians, and there was a group of prostitutes, as well as others, you know, but these sort of things just kind of made pictures in my mind. I hadn't ever seen that before.
Whatever it is, do it, as long as it pleases you.
Now that is what they did, and they did it on national television.
As Anita Bryant and others have discovered, another American minority is loudly demanding equal treatment.
Anita Bryant was speaking out on the homosexual movement, and she was getting accosted, or she'd get a pie thrown in her face.
I have been blacklisted for exercising the right of a mother to defend her children and all children against their being recruited by homosexuals.
I kept saying, why don't the ministers stand? Why does a woman have to stand up and get the abuse of these homosexuals?
If it don't turn you on, you want to leave it alone.
We got a note back from the third grade teacher of our youngest son, inviting parents to a meeting at the school to discuss the growing drug problem in the elementary school. And at that point we said, this is it. Pull them all out, and we're determined to put them in private Christian schools.
The American family. Is it an endangered species?
The longer I'm laid off, as money gets tighter, you have a tendency to pick at each other a little bit.
Well, at the last yearly count, there were 1,100,000 divorces. And those divorces involved more than 1,117,000 children.
The word family has got to be defined a lot more generously than it has been through our recent history.
You know, you could even have two lesbians bringing up a child in a wonderful way.
The birth of the world's first so-called test tube baby in England has raised fears that women who don't want to be bothered with carrying a child for 9 months may hire other women to do it for them.
People said, why do we have these rules about divorce? Why do we have these rules about pornography and so on? These are just dead customs passed along by our forebears. We don't know why they existed.
What you're saying is the parents really ought to discuss the merits of masturbation with their children.
They certainly should.
Free your mind and your ass will follow.
The kingdom of heaven is within.
Recent statistics show that 1/2 of the teenage girls in the United States are not virgins.
A teenager named James who lost his virginity in prime time.
It makes it, like if you don't have sex, what's wrong with you?
One thing that people do, which is probably incorrect, is to try to persuade the young people to stop doing what they're doing.
Name the issue that dominated the 70s more than any other: women's rights.
The Equal Rights Amendment, abortion, affirmative action for women in all kinds of jobs.
Women became firemen, astronauts, the mayor of Chicago, the governor of Connecticut.
The Equal Rights Amendment is basically a fraud. It pretends and proclaims that it's going to give some benefit to women. There's no benefit for women in it. So we sent out the call to the various churches across the country, told them that they were threatened by the Equal Rights Amendment and they needed to come to a rally. We had all the various Protestant denominations. We had the Catholics, we had the Mormons, we had the Orthodox Jews, and when the Baptists joined us, that really doubled our strength.
The masses of American people, and particularly evangelical women, began to wake up the fact that we were being overrun by this group of feminists who claimed to speak for all of us.
Yeah. Most of these people didn't know each other before then. But they came, they followed us, we had the demonstrations, and they realized they could work together in behalf of a common goal.
Mr. President, I appreciate this opportunity to talk to you. I feel that you are violating the states' rights when you call into the different states and lobby for the ERA.
Okay. Well, I think you probably have noticed that the final decision is with the state legislatures. And although I have made a few telephone calls since I've been in office and have talked to some personally and to some governors about the passage of ERA, I haven't tried to interfere or put pressure on them. When I ran for president, I made it clear that I was in favor of the Equal Rights Amendment passing, and still am in favor of it and hope it does pass.
I remember Jimmy Carter coming out as an evangelical, born-again Baptist, and remember the great spirit of cheering that went up on first hearing all across the evangelical world. And then they began to find out that his politics were more liberal, and then they got confused.
He invited 12 ministers in for breakfast, and I was one of the 12 invited in, and I asked him something about why he, as a Christian and a pro-family man, as he protested to be, was in favor of the Equal Rights Amendment in view of the fact that it would be so harmful to the family. And he gave some way off-the-wall answer that the Equal Rights Amendment was good for the family. Well, I knew when he said that he was out to lunch.
I think during the Carter administration, because he was a self-proclaimed born-again Christian, he had an enormous amount of goodwill among evangelicals, and I think prayer was not so much for the nation as for him, and to encourage him that we might see some shift away from the malaise and so forth that they talked about. And before his administration was finished, however, the evangelicals had become totally disillusioned with Carter and were praying that somehow the Lord would deliver us from him.
One of the most difficult things to sustain as president is sort of subliminal general themes. And I think one of our difficulties, perhaps failings, was not doing a better job of that. But the reason why it's so difficult is simply that a president has to make real live decisions, hundreds and hundreds of decisions, economic decisions, foreign policy decisions, which tend to overwhelm these more subliminal messages. Now, we did, in fact, in many ways, try to carry through the family values, traditional values notion, dealing with things like the marriage penalty and the tax code, with him going to church and teaching on Sunday even as president, as a part of his regular routine, of having a prayer before meetings with congressional leadership. I mean, there were a number of things like that were done and that were, again, not at all contrived, part of the essential Carter.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
I talked last Sunday night about a crisis of confidence in our country. And the family is very much part of that crisis. Part of the problem, yes. But much more importantly, it is a major part of the solution. Without question, the American family is in trouble. The family has survived, though, many social and technological revolutions in the past. And our families can survive the current changes and stresses. They are too precious. The families are too basic, too essential not to survive. Ultimately, the family may emerge from this test even stronger if we are successful and the American people are successful in facing facts and acting together.
I had no intention of working for the White House Conference on Families, but then we talked about how they might go about trying to listen to families and accomplish some things. And my advice to them was they ought to get it out of Washington. They ought to listen more than they ought to talk, that I was not very enamored of traditional White House Conference on Families, and that they ought to spend less of their energy on a big Washington meeting and more of their energy on listening to families and hearings and state dialogues and sort of decentralize them. And they liked that idea for some reason and decided that I ought to do it.
Organizers tried to make the conference a model of public outreach, with hearings and delegate elections across the country. To help determine the conference agenda, they commissioned a nationwide Gallup survey. It revealed that Americans were most concerned about economic pressures on family life, such as inflation, taxes, and health care costs.
Is there anything in it that surprised you or that really struck you?
I guess some of the intensity of emotions surprised me a bit. For one thing, 80% of the American people say that their family is the most important thing in their life, or one of the very most important things. Not their job, not some hobby, not some other outside activity, but their family. And I guess secondly, there's some fairly traditional values that showed up that were very strong.
I don't think they had any glimpse of the difference in worldview. I don't think it had come across their radar screen that there were people out there, let alone a significant number of people out there, who didn't think government was an extension of themselves in performing the works of charity, who didn't think that government was always to be trusted and looked to. I don't think they realized that there were intelligent, articulate, credible people out there in large numbers who had a totally different point of view.
In the evangelical world, family seminars, marriage seminars, children's seminars, parenting, those kinds of things were natural and normal, and speakers traveled all over and tapes were disseminated. It was just a natural part of our world. And to then see that a White House conference on the family was going to take place, and it was kind of like these people weren't even a part of it, I think that created at the grassroots level, as well as in my own mind, something's wrong here. Either it's being rigged or they genuinely don't know what they're doing.
I remember going up to a meeting of conservative political groups on the Hill, organized, I think, by Paul Wyrick or somebody else, where for about an hour and a half we were told what we were doing to destroy American families. And we invited them in and said, get involved. This is going to be a process of dialogue.
I think this has been the most open White House conference in history, and that we are going to have an awful lot of delegates here who are not here grinding their own particular axes, but are here to represent their families and families like them.
I think there were about 4 or 6 of us from the Lynchburg County area that went as delegates, and I felt like maybe I was the token homemaker that got to go on. I don't know.
I mean, I had been working in the political arena. There was no question about that in terms of public policy for children, youth, families, those kind of things. But, you know, we had really worked on very much of a kind of across the spectrum, bipartisan, you know, whenever we worked in the legislature, we worked both sides of the aisle. You never worked one side, not the other. And, you know, and children's issues were very much bipartisan issues.
I went because I was involved in daycare. Organizing daycare was all over the state of Iowa, dealing with daycare issues, dealing with people that couldn't get in daycare, trying to get legislation through that would help people, minorities and poor people to get daycare, working on trying to see that the children in the home were be able to get, their parents be able to get training and things. So I didn't go in there with all this. People came in with research they did and reasoning and all those. We didn't have that.
I did have work to do there about speaking out and representing what I knew about child advocacy issues, what I knew about child welfare, what I knew about child abuse, what I knew about juvenile delinquency, et cetera. So I was there for that and was committed to representing my state in that.
How about the special interest group?
The special interest groups will be here. They're conservative, they're liberal, they're particularly concerned about one or more issues. They'll be here, but I don't think they're going to be able to overwhelm anybody. In order to get a recommendation out of this conference, they're going to have to get a majority of the people to buy what they're selling, and that's going to take a lot.
As the delegates file into this conference, there are two groups outside demonstrating. One might be described as conservative, the other as liberal. But ironically, they are united in their viewpoint on this conference. They both see it as an attack on the family.
We are here to discuss the family, and I don't think that we should get involved in discussions without first defining what the family is.
The first hurdle they came to was that they could not decide on what a family was. They were politically correct years before their time, and they could not agree on a definition of the family. So the first thing they did was change the name of the conference from White House Conference on the Family to White House Conference on Families.
Why would it be so hard for the White House Conference to say families are people related by blood, marriage, or adoption? Why would it be so hard for them to do that? The only reason it would be so hard for them to do that is that they want families to be other things. They want homosexuals to be able to be considered families, or ad hoc communes, or Jim Jones type of situations, or Manson families. That's the danger, of course. That's the greatest danger. But the legitimization of illegitimate lifestyles such as homosexuality is really the root of the definition of the family question, and the fact that the White House does not want to deal with that.
As far as I know about the history of our country and many other and all other countries, they have been single parents. And I would like to ask the professional lady who just spoke, since when have we not been considered a traditional family? I am a family, we are all families, and I'd like to know what the definition, what I am if I'm not a family with my child.
It was almost beyond me. I kind of had not heard, I'd not been into that controversy before. And as I got into it, it became to me kind of my sense of, it was kind of unrealistic to this narrow, confined definition of family when you look at the reality of what America is.
Well, I think from the beginning of time, a family has been looked at as a mom and dad and children with marriage bonds. Now I'm aware that there are a lot of differences even in various cultures and societies around the world. Of course, I feel that God has ordained this family unit as his pattern.
I'm married with 5 children, and I guess I feel very vulnerable right now because I believe I'm in a minority, at least in this conference, but I don't believe that I am in a minority in terms of the country.
Ladies and gentlemen, what decides life or death anywhere in the last 5,000 years is not a Gallup poll or is not a counting up of numbers. Life comes from God.
I am anti-war. I am anti-capital punishment. I am anti-murder. And I am also anti-murder of unborn children.
I am very much opposed to the Equal Rights Amendment, very much opposed to abortion, very much opposed to the homosexual issues that are here.
Mary said, I'm a mother with children, and what are these people talking about?
Yeah, I guess one of my real concerns was that I really thought that we were there to look at all of the issues that affected families. And I had short patience with people who wanted to make it a single issue, whatever the issue was. And so when we were to say, but wait a minute, we've got male children who are in school and can't get a decent education, and so we need to talk about this thing about education, and then here they are saying, but no, we don't need to deal with that, we need to deal with other things. And I'm supposed to go against the interests of my people and the interests of people in my family or my own child. You know, I'm supposed to go against that simply because you say this is the agenda.
I'm strongly opposed to abortion. I work on pro-life issues, have all my life. But my role in the conference was not to make sure that my position on that came out. but to make sure that in the discussion and the decisions of the conference, people had a fair shake. My experience was that the vast majority of people who participated in this process were trying to find the common ground and trying to build bridges, and we're really pleased and satisfied that despite the enormous diversity and differences of opinion, that on a whole range of important concerns for families, they did find common ground on issues that crossed the liberal, conservative, Democrat, and Republican lines.
Nevertheless, the so-called pro-family group claims the conference is rigged and being used to help re-elect President Carter by making him appear concerned about the family.
But what they seek to avoid are the controversial issues. They don't want debate on right to life. They don't want debate on homosexuality and other things which we think, the definition of the family, which we think are key to whether this conference really faces the questions on the family or not.
Group 7 has the job of defining the definition of family. And you will have a chance to get into that dialogue tomorrow.
They had professional facilitators. Well, the job of the professional facilitators is to keep anything off the blackboard that doesn't fit. They'd be talking about women and child health, and somebody would get up and say, well, what about abortion? Oh, that's not what we're talking about here. That's not an issue. And so after a day of that, it was very clear that our issues were never going to see the light of day. They were never going to get out of that first level workshop up to the second level workshop. And if they didn't make it to the second level workshop, they were never going to make it to the full group.
That's the rules of the conference.
I didn't read that much.
That is the rules. Group 7 will deal with the definition. Now, if I could go on.
It was becoming more and more evident to everyone in their session that what they had presented as what we had decided and determined in Virginia was not being reported as it was. It had been changed kind of back to fit the I guess President Carter's criteria for what the White House Conference on the Family was going to be.
We had a president who initiated this conference, who used the term born again, who said he was born again, and yet we had that whole world that was kind of being left out. So there was a real kind of consternation. Now, had it been a president that wasn't familiar at all with people in that world, it might have been a little different response.
I began to see very quickly coalitions taking shape and rump meetings and side meetings, and finding myself actually caught up in that process.
The purpose of this conference was not to exclude people, it was to include people. It was to take a look at how we can possibly come up with a pattern or a definition of family that includes everybody that has needs in America.
When someone would say something clearly insulting to gay and lesbian people, it was as if I had no right in my own country to be recognized as a family. You know, I'm embarrassed to say, but I reacted. I did take that personally, and I got mad at it. And I didn't make sure that I kept my respect in place for their right to speak as well as mine. And frankly, I wish they would have shut up. Do you know what I mean?
When we got here, we found that not only were we not allowed to discuss those issues at all, that the definition of the family was ruled non-germane, out of order in every work group except one. Most of the facilitators said that we're not going to talk about the definition of family in this work group, that's going to come up in work group number 7. Well, the people in work group number 7 didn't get a definition of the family out of that work group either. That means that issue has been killed.
There was no choice of what to do but to withdraw, to walk out of it. Because had we stayed in and continued to be part of that process, the conclusions of which were foregone against us, we would have been giving legitimacy to their process.
I was invited to a meeting previous to that where they were strategizing, and I said that I wasn't going to walk out. And my very good friend from then till now, although that was about the first time I had met her, Connie Marshner, said, no, we have to walk out. We're not going to change anything here. We're too small a group. This place is stacked. I forget, 2,000 delegates. And I didn't agree, and that was a very uncomfortable feeling.
It was just such a unwinnable situation that I was very much in agreement with the others. And, you know, many of the others in the leadership and all probably knew more than I did, I'm sure, about what maybe could even be accomplished through this, but they felt nothing was going to be accomplished anyway, so it was futile.
Well, clearly wasn't the case. I mean, their point of view wasn't excluded because we helped ensure it would be there. In fact, Connie Marshner was selected by us to make sure those voices were heard. Their message in part was, if we don't prevail, we're going to take on the process. I remember reading in one newspaper, a woman who headed the so-called pro-family group in Tennessee said, look, and I think this is a direct quote, says, I'm going to try and win all the delegates in Tennessee. And if I don't win all the delegates, I'm going to put out a press release saying the process was stacked.
In the midst of one of the final assemblies where various health and family planning services were being considered, some 80 delegates staged a march to the stage, tearing up their ballots. Connie Marshner and 30 to 80 of her coalition left the meeting claiming the procedures and delegate selection and agenda had been rigged against them.
Are you saying that this whole conference is a much more liberal, stacked deck?
Absolutely.
You got it. You got it.
The hot button issue that put together abortion, ERA, and the only time I believe gay rights was ever mentioned in the White House Conference on Families in a resolution, passed by one vote. The day after, 40 people who said they were opposed to those things had walked out. So it was their tactics that in a way got ahead of their principles.
And there were a couple people there who said, wait a minute, you don't want to discredit the whole process, and you don't want to discredit it. And I said, why not? Why not?
The fact is, the conference is so controversial that it spawned an opposition group called the Pro-Family Conference. The leaders of these organizations are in Washington this morning with Carol Simpson, who is there not just to moderate, but to referee as well. Good morning.
I hope not, Tom. Thank you, and good morning. With me are Jim Guy Tucker, who is chairman of the White House Conference on Families, and Mrs. Connie Marshner, who is chairman of the National Pro-Family Coalition. Mr. Tucker, the White House Conference has completed 3 regional hearings around the country, and now you have a series of recommendations. Could you tell us what some of those are that you'll be proposing to the government?
Well, we didn't propose them. In fact, we had delegates propose them who came from all over the country at 3 conferences where they debated, sometimes fought, and usually agreed on major issues facing American families. The top issue in terms of yes vote getters dealt not with government, but with problems in private industry, need for flexitime, job sharing, daycare, the problems of women entering into the workforce.
Mr. Tucker didn't mention the things like the demands for federal financing of abortion and guaranteed annual income and federal funding of child care and various issues like that, which were also recommended by all 3 conferences. He doesn't like to talk about those because those reveal the conference for what it was, namely an attempt to resurrect a political carcass, a liberal agenda that has been rejected by the voters and by Congress for 20 years, an attempt to resuscitate it and wrap it in the flag of family and call it legitimate.
What is your reaction to what she's saying?
Well, Connie, in my judgment, has a vested interest in dealing with polarization, and that's her viewpoint.
Well, I object to that, Jim Guy. I think that's rather sort of trying to calm the audience a little bit, don't you think?
Well, that's your press release.
We feel that Jim Guy, I think the White House Conference would feel that the government can help people solve their problems and that professionals and human service professionals know better than families how to solve their problems. That's what the White House Conference is.
Sorry to cut this off. Looks like we could go on for some time, but thank you very much, and we'll be looking forward to your recommendations and yours as well. Now back to Tom Brokaw in New York.
Thanks, Carol. Nothing escapes controversy these days, it turns out, not even the American family.
The reality here is the definition of news is conflict and controversy. The fact that people from many walks of life and differing ideological and political perspectives can come together and agree on an agenda for American families is sort of a middle of the paper story. The fact that people are disputing each other horribly on abortion and homosexuality, now that's news.
In fact, that is what has happened to the White House Conference. And you can probably find a copy of the White House Conference report. I got one on my shelf in there if you need to see one. But you're not going to find them anywhere else, and it's not going to be cited as, a seminal document in the development of family policy in this country.
Every family is different, unique, If I ever doubt that, I have to look at my own family. Early in 1976, there had been some stories around town, all false, of course, that my brother Billy was something of a character, and they were trying to probe what Billy was. And he said, listen, he said, I've got one sister almost 50 years old that spends every weekend on a motorcycle. He said, I've got another sister, not quite so old, who's a holy roller preacher. He said, I've got a mother that joined the Peace Corps when she's 68 years old. He said, I've got a brother that thinks he's going to be president of the United States. He said, I'm the only sane one in the whole family.
What he intended for good was turned against him. And the very people that he invited, or through him we invited to come and help with the conference, pulled out their long knives and began to slash at him and the conference. My political naivete pretty well shot right there. If I thought people of faith just sat down and worked out the differences for the common good, pretty well blew it out of the water.
The White House Conference was a very good training ground because it got our people involved in a process that they hadn't been involved in before, but they also had a clear look at the results of that process, and they realized, wait a minute, we can't play by the old rules anymore. We've got to get onto a playing field where we help write the rules.
In the broader scale of the political world, sometimes to mobilize people, you have to do things that will mobilize people. And conservative stage walkout was front page news. And it woke people up all across the country to what was going on from their perspective. And so from that standpoint, sure, we may have lost a vote by 1 or 2 votes in the short run, but from their perspective, which was much more politically seasoned than myself, they may have won the war down the road.
While one may disagree with them philosophically and politically, as I do on many issues, one has to admire their sense of energy, their sense of organization, their sense of involvement in a political system that has become very staid and very moribund, with declining levels of participation in elections, with fewer people involved in grassroots activities. This energy level was really injected around the 1980 campaign and since by the conservative movement.
And we all made a commitment to God that day. For the first time in our lives, we were going to get involved in the political process and do everything we could to wake up the Christians. So I stood there and I prayed this prayer. I said, oh God, we have got to get this man out of the White House and get someone in here who will be aggressive about bringing back traditional moral values.